The baby shower should have been filled with joy, warm lights, guests offering gifts and blessings, but then the husband's mistress walked straight into the room with a triumphant smile. She raised her glass and humiliated the pregnant wife in front of everyone, declaring that she was the true winner. The entire room fell silent as the wife stood there, frozen in shock and confusion. What the mistress did not know was that she had just picked the wrong target. The wife's mother is a Supreme Court judge, and once she steps in, the mistress's arrogance will turn into pure fear. What follows is a battle of lies, power, and justice. And trust me, you will not see the ending coming until we reach it together. Let us know what time you are watching and where you are tuning in from. Leave a comment below. The late afternoon sun filtered through the tall pine trees surrounding the Hartman family's wooden house in rural Vermont. Inside, the living room glowed with soft yellow lights, pink ribbons, pastel balloons, and the gentle chatter of neighbors and close friends who had gathered for Emily Hartman's baby shower. Emily, 8 months pregnant, moved carefully around the room with a warm smile, thanking guests, accepting small wrapped gifts, and taking short breaks when her back tightened. She wore a loose cream sweater and soft maternity pants, the kind that made her feel safe. For a few hours, she wanted this celebration to be about joy and anticipation, rather than the nerves and exhaustion that had settled into her life these past weeks. The baby shower felt like a classic American suburban gathering. A long table near the window held cupcakes with tiny blue stars, a pitcher of apple cider, and a beautifully decorated cake made by an elderly neighbor who treated Emily like her own granddaughter. Several guests admired the nursery photos displayed on a small board. Everyone agreed the room where the baby would sleep looked peaceful and cozy. Emily loved hearing their excitement. It calmed her. While speaking to 2 guests about Vermont winters, Emily felt her phone buzz. Expecting a message from her mother or her sister, she picked it up without thinking. What appeared on the screen froze her in place. A message from a contact labeled T-Office read, "I can't wait until she finally gives birth, so you're free. I love you." Her fingers trembled. She nearly dropped the phone. The loud thud of her glass hitting the floor drew the attention of everyone nearby. Emily felt the room tilt for a moment. She tried to steady her breathing, but her chest tightened. Across the room, Adam Cole, her husband, glanced over. His eyes widened for a split second before he forced a thin smile and walked toward her. Emily looked at him, her voice barely steady as she asked, "Who is this message from, Adam?" Her tone carried a mixture of fear and disbelief. Adam leaned close, pretending to check the phone quickly. "Emily, you're imagining things. Someone must have texted the wrong number." His voice was calm on the surface, but his eyes darted nervously. Emily pressed a hand against her stomach. It tightened painfully. She did not want to cause a scene. Guests were watching with concern, whispering softly. She forced a weak smile and assured them she was fine, but her heart raced faster. Meanwhile, in the far corner of the room, a young woman who was not officially on the guest list stood quietly with a small plate of fruit she had barely touched. Lana Price, 26. Blonde hair curled perfectly. A fitted sweater and jeans that seemed too fashionable for a casual Vermont gathering. She leaned against the wall with her arms crossed, watching Emily with a faint smirk. When Emily looked in her direction, Lana raised one eyebrow as if daring her to react. Emily looked away quickly. She tried again to speak privately with Adam. "Why would someone say that to you?" Adam sighed loudly, annoyed rather than worried. "You're stressing yourself out. Stop overthinking." Indes. Ode. Her lower belly clenched sharply. A false contraction, she hoped. The stress was too much. She stepped away from the crowd, walking toward the hallway to catch her breath. But the moment she reached the chair near the entryway, Lana walked straight over. Lana leaned forward and whispered softly, "He'll leave you soon. You should prepare yourself." Emily's eyes widened. She stared at Lana, searching her face for any sign that this was a cruel joke. But Lana's eyes were cold, confident, victorious. Emily could not understand how this woman she barely knew was speaking to her with such certainty. "Why are you here?" Emily asked quietly. Lana shrugged. I just wanted to see how long you would pretend not to know." Emily felt tears rise in her eyes. She stood up quickly, clutching her belly. She did not want the guests to witness this humiliation. She turned and walked outside to the back porch, breathing in the cold air, trying to calm herself. The wooden boards felt steady beneath her feet, but her legs trembled. Inside, guests whispered, confused by the sudden tension. Some of them wondered if Emily's labor had started. Others tried to distract themselves by cutting more cake. But the atmosphere had changed. The warmth of the celebration evaporated. Adam followed Emily outside with irritation in his expression. "You embarrassed me back there," he muttered. Emily turned toward him, shocked. "Embarrassed you," she repeated. Her heart ached. "Someone texted you that they love you." And she, Emily, pointed through the window toward Lana, is here smirking like she knows everything. Adam raised his hands. "You're being too sensitive. Stop acting like this." Emily sat down heavily on a patio chair. She struggled to breathe evenly. "I'm not imagining anything," she whispered. Through the window, Lana stood with her arms still crossed, chin raised, watching them like someone who had already claimed victory. Even from a distance, Emily could feel the venom in that stare. It was a look that said, "I've already won." Emily felt her vision blur. The baby moved inside her, and another contraction gripped her body. She held her stomach and gasped. "Adam, something's wrong." Instead of comforting her, Adam muttered, "You're overreacting." Again. Emily felt something inside her break. Not a physical pain, but a deep emotional crack she had feared for months. Her world, which she had tried so hard to keep stable, now shook violently beneath her feet. The guests kept celebrating indoors without understanding the storm that had begun. And Emily realized, with a chill she could not shake, that this betrayal was only the beginning. Something far worse waited ahead. The sun had barely moved across the winter sky when Emily heard the sound of footsteps on her front porch. She had barely slept the night before. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and she felt drained in every possible way. She shuffled through the living room slowly, one hand supporting her lower back, the other gripping a mug of warm tea she hoped would settle her nerves. When she opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. Lana Price stood there, dressed in a fitted coat and stylish boots that did not match the quiet Vermont neighborhood. She looked like someone who walked straight out of a city boutique and into the life she believed she now owned. Without waiting to be invited, Lana stepped inside. Her heels clicked sharply against the wooden floor, as if announcing a new authority in this home. Emily hesitated. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Lana glanced around the living room with an air of entitlement. "Checking on things," she replied lightly. "I wanted to see what I will be dealing with soon." She brushed past Emily and placed her purse on the kitchen counter, as if she lived there. Her posture radiated ownership. Emily felt a wave of confusion and anger, but exhaustion held her back. "You do not belong here," she said, but her voice lacked strength. Lana turned to her with a slow smile. "Oh, Emily, please, let us not pretend any more." She lifted her left hand, revealing a delicate gold ring glinting under the kitchen light. "He chose me. You were just an obligation he felt guilty about." Her tone was casual, almost cheerful, as if discussing something trivial. Emily's fingers trembled so violently she almost dropped her mug. Her chest tightened. She drew in a shaky breath. "That is not true." "It is completely true," Lana said as she walked closer, her expression filled with smug certainty. "He told me everything. I am the one he wants. I am the one he will build a future with. You are only holding him back." Emily stumbled to the side and braced herself against a chair. She felt small, fragile, and overwhelmed by the cruelty of the moment. Her heart thudded unevenly as she tried to steady her breathing. Lana continued talking, as though she enjoyed every second of crushing Emily's confidence. "We already talked about moving in together," Lana said, "after the baby is out of the picture." She paused with deliberate cruelty, watching Emily's reaction. Emily pressed her hand against her stomach protectively. "What do you mean by that?" Lana leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "This baby is the last obstacle." She reached out her hand and placed it boldly on Emily's belly. The touch felt like a violation, Emily recoiled instantly and pushed Lana's hand away. "Do not touch me," she snapped. Despite her weakness, she tried to stand tall. "And do not talk about my baby like that," Lana smirked. "See, this is exactly why Adam feels suffocated. You overreact. You cling. You pretend to be the victim." Emily moved backward toward the kitchen table. She felt dizzy from stress and hormonal imbalance. Her legs shook. She reached for a glass of water to calm herself, but her hand was unsteady, and the glass nearly slipped. Lana pulled out her phone and pointed it toward Emily. "Perfect," Lana said. "Look at you, acting aggressive. This is great. I need proof if Adam wants to move things forward." Emily's voice cracked. "Are you recording me?" "Of course," Lana replied. "You are unstable. People will believe me." She held the phone higher, capturing every tremble, every tear forming in Emily's eyes. Before Emily could say anything else, the front door opened. Adam stepped in, stopping short when he saw the scene. His gaze shifted between his wife and Lana, but instead of concern for Emily, annoyance crossed his face. "Really?" Adam said with frustration. "Emily, what are you doing?" Emily stared at him in disbelief. "She is filming me. She is threatening me." "Adam," she said, "the baby is an obstacle." Adam moved toward Lana protectively. "Emily, stop creating drama. Lana is only trying to help." Emily's knees weakened. She sank into the nearest chair, gripping her abdomen as a sharp pain shot through her lower belly. Her breaths came quickly, her chest rising and falling as fear and betrayal wrapped around her like ice. Lana laughed. The sound cut through the room like broken glass. "Help!" "Yes, that is right. He understands." She walked behind Adam and placed a hand lightly on his shoulder, claiming him in front of Emily. "He is with me now. You should accept reality." Emily's eyes filled with tears. The pain in her stomach intensified. "Adam, please, I am hurting. Something is wrong." But Adam did not reach for her. Instead, he adjusted his sleeve and responded coldly, "Emily, you are overreacting again. Stop trying to use the baby to manipulate me." The words crushed her. Emily doubled over slightly, breathing unevenly. She could feel her pulse in her temples. Lana noticed and snorted. "This is pathetic. You really think any of this will make him stay with you?" Emily felt lightheaded, her face drained of color. She tried to lift herself from the chair but could not. She looked up at Adam with pleading eyes. "Please, I need help." Instead of calling for assistance, Adam turned to Lana. "Are you okay?" he asked her gently. Emily choked back a sob. The sound filled the room with a painful heaviness. Lana resumed recording, angling the phone to capture Emily nearly collapsing. "This is priceless," she said with a malicious grin. "You have nothing left." "In one," Emily's voice trembled. "Why are you doing this to me?" "Because I have already won," Lana declared triumphantly. Her laughter echoed through the quiet house. Emily clutched the edge of the table, her vision blurred. Her body felt too heavy. "No," she whispered softly. "Not yet." At that exact moment, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway cut through the tension. Tires crunched on the gravel. A door slammed shut. Footsteps approached the front porch with swift determination. Adam and Lana stopped laughing. Their expressions shifted instantly. Emily looked toward the door, fear and hope mixing inside her. Someone powerful had arrived. The person who stepped in would change everything. The front door swung open with a sudden burst of cold Vermont wind, sending a sweep of icy air through the living room. The sound cut through the tension like a blade. Lana lowered her phone. Adam stiffened. Emily, struggling to breathe through the tight pressure in her abdomen, lifted her head toward the doorway. The light from outside framed the figure stepping inside. A tall woman in her early 60s entered the room. Her silver hair was neatly swept back. Her long winter coat carried tiny crystals of snow that sparkled under the hallway lights. Every movement she made carried a controlled grace. Her presence alone shifted the energy in the house. It was as if the room itself straightened its posture when she stepped inside. Emily's eyes widened as tears gathered at the corners. "Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking. Margaret Hartman shut the door behind her with a deliberate motion before stepping farther into the living room. Her eyes scanned the scene quickly and sharply. She took in the sight of her pregnant daughter, gripping her stomach, the pale color on Emily's face, the way she leaned against the chair for stability. Then Margaret saw Adam standing too close to Lana, and she saw Lana's phone still raised, angled toward Emily. Margaret's expression changed instantly. It went from composed to ice-cold. Adam swallowed hard. "I thought you were still in California," he stammered. "We were not expecting you." Lana leaned closer to Adam and whispered, "Who is she?" But Adam did not answer. His lips pressed together. His skin turned noticeably pale. Margaret took one step forward. Her voice carried the calm authority of someone used to commanding entire courtrooms. "Adam," she said firmly, "step back, now." Her tone left no room for negotiation. Adam obeyed almost reflexively. He moved away from Emily as if a magnetic force pushed him aside. The shift made Lana blink in confusion. She tried to stand straighter, adjusting her coat as if trying to reclaim her confidence. Margaret turned her attention to Lana. Her gaze traveled slowly from Lana's face to her shoes, then back to her face again. The silence between them stretched into something sharp and suffocating. Emily watched her mother's expression and recognized the look instantly. It was the same expression Margaret wore when a witness had been caught lying in one of her high-profile cases. Lana attempted to break the moment. "Excuse me," she said with a hint of irritation. "You cannot talk to me like that. I have a right to be here." Margaret's head turned toward her with precise control. Her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. The room felt colder. Emily took a shallow breath as pain pulsed across her lower abdomen. She tried to stand, but her legs felt weak. Margaret immediately stepped toward her. "Emily," she said, "sit down. Do not force yourself." Then she looked back at Adam. "Why is she in this house?" Margaret asked. Her words were slow and sharp. Adam's throat tightened. "I can explain," he said weakly. "There was a misunderstanding. I was trying to help Emily. Lana was only trying to provide support." Margaret's eyes darkened. "You are not qualified to explain anything to me," she said. The sentence landed like a gavel strike. Lana's mouth dropped open. She looked from Adam to Margaret, trying to understand why Adam suddenly appeared terrified. "Seriously," Lana said. "Who exactly are you?" Margaret's gaze did not waver. She took another step closer. When she spoke, her voice lowered into a tone that carried unmistakable weight. "You are speaking," she said, "to the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court." The words echoed in the room. The impact was immediate. Lana's face drained of color as though the blood had been pulled from her veins. Her phone slipped slightly in her grasp. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She stared at Margaret in disbelief, suddenly aware of the gravity of what she had walked into so arrogantly. Adam's shoulders slumped. His hands fell to his sides. He looked like a man who had just realized every bad decision he had made was about to come crashing down on him. The confidence he once displayed evaporated completely. Emily sobbed softly, both from the pain and the overwhelming relief of seeing her mother. For the first time since the ordeal began, she felt protected, shielded, no longer trapped between betrayal and helplessness. Margaret moved toward her daughter and gently placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. The strength in the gesture steadied Emily's breathing. Margaret did not look at Lana or Adam for several seconds. She did not need to. Her presence alone dominated the room. The silence grew heavy. Even the wind outside seemed quieter. Finally, Margaret lifted her chin slightly and looked at both of them. "I will ask again," she said quietly. "What exactly is happening here?" Adam opened his mouth, but no words formed. He stood frozen in place, caught between fear and regret. Lana tried to speak. "I did not know," she stuttered. "I did not know who you were." "Yet you still chose to speak with disrespect," Margaret replied calmly. "That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Lana lowered her eyes. Margaret turned back to Emily. "You are safe now," she said softly. "I am here." That simple reassurance broke something inside Emily. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She held her mother's arm tightly and leaned forward, seeking comfort she had been denied all this time. The room felt smaller, as if Margaret's presence had pushed every dark corner into the light. The weight of her authority, her status, And above all, her fierce love for her daughter filled every inch of the home. For the first time since the baby shower had fallen apart, Emily felt supported. She was no longer alone in this battle. Someone powerful had arrived indeed, and everything had just changed. The silence in the living room felt heavy as Margaret Hartman stood at the center of the space. Snow continued to fall outside, but the coldest thing in the house was the expression on her face. With a simple gesture, she motioned for everyone to sit. "All of you, sit down," she instructed. Her voice was calm, firm, and filled with authority. Emily moved to the couch, breathing carefully as the pain in her abdomen throbbed. Margaret sat beside her, placing a steady hand on her daughter's back. Adam and Lana exchanged a nervous look before lowering themselves slowly into their chairs. Lana swallowed hard. Her voice cracked as she asked, "Toa toi kau thata." She had never stuttered so openly in her life. The glamorous confidence she walked in with less than an hour ago had evaporated. Margaret did not acknowledge the question verbally. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and retrieved a small black leather wallet. She opened it slowly, revealing the unmistakable seal of the federal government and her formal Supreme Court identification. She placed it on the coffee table with deliberate precision. The sight of it nearly made Lana choke. She covered her mouth, then dropped her hands to her lap as if unsure of what she was allowed to do. Her face shifted from shock to panic. She glanced toward the doorway as if considering escape, but her legs trembled too much for her to stand. Her shoulders rounded inward. For the first time, she realized she was no longer dealing with a simple domestic dispute. She had walked straight into the home of the most powerful judicial figure in the country. And she had done so while attempting to intimidate a pregnant woman. Margaret's attention turned to Adam. "You will explain everything," she said. "All of it. Right now." Her voice carried the weight of absolute command. Adam tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. "May, Khan." He paused, then attempted again with a shaky breath. "There have been misunderstandings. I wanted to help Emily, but things got complicated." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Complicated is not a defense," she replied. Her tone grew sharper. "Tell the truth." Adam opened his mouth again, prepared to stretch the truth into something that sounded sympathetic, but Margaret reached into her bag and removed a printed email. She held it up between two fingers. "This," she said, "is the truth." She passed it to Adam, who froze as he recognized the subject line. It was an email he had once sent Lana, a message expressing affection, impatience, and resentment toward his pregnant wife. He had thought he deleted it. He had been wrong. Emily's breath caught as she read the date. 7 months, she whispered. Her voice shook. "You have been with her for more than 7 months. She placed a hand over her chest. "While I was pregnant. While I trusted you." A tear slid down her cheek, and she pressed her lips together to keep from sobbing. Her mother gently squeezed her shoulder. Adam's face turned red, then pale. "Emily, I was under pressure. Work was difficult. I made mistakes because I felt trapped." Margaret did not allow him to finish. "Pressure is not a reason," she said. "It is an excuse, and not a very convincing one." Her voice softened only when she glanced at Emily. "No amount of pressure justifies betraying your wife, especially when she is carrying your child." Lana's lips trembled. She spoke suddenly, almost desperately. "I never meant to hurt her. I swear. I only wanted to be with Adam. I did not realize how far things had gone." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I only followed what he told me. He said she was dramatic. He said she was manipulative. He said she did not love him." Is entered. Margaret turned her head and gave Lana a cold, unwavering stare. "You accessed her information without consent. You entered her home uninvited. You manipulated a pregnant woman. That is not harmless behavior. That is an intentional act meant to inflict emotional harm." She paused, "And in Vermont, causing harm to a pregnant woman through deception or coercion is considered a serious offense." At those words, Lana broke completely. She fell to her knees beside the chair, crying uncontrollably. "Please," she begged. "I did not know. I did not know it was this serious. Please do not ruin my life." Margaret did not blink. "You ruined your own life the moment you chose cruelty over decency." She looked away from Lana, dismissing her presence entirely. Adam stepped forward slightly, wringing his hands. Me, kong shin me, du kong bit apluk kong viek, kong met moi, kong bit filamji. Margaret shook her head. And you decided betrayal was the easiest choice, Emily cried quietly beside her. Margaret reached out and took her daughter's hand. You are not alone, she whispered. You will never be alone again. Adam sensed the situation slipping beyond anything he could control. Emily, he said softly, please, I am begging you, do not destroy everything. I still love you. Emily lifted her head, tears shining in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but her mother spoke first. Margaret rose from the couch, standing tall and imposing. My daughter has endured enough pain. The time for excuses is over. Her voice filled the entire house. Now it is time for justice. The justice of this family, and the justice of this nation. The room fell silent. No one dared to breathe deeply. The storm Margaret brought with her had only begun. The morning after the confrontation felt strangely quiet in the Hartman house. Snow fell softly outside, covering the neighborhood in a pale white coat that made everything look peaceful, even though nothing in Emily's life was peaceful anymore. She sat on the couch, wrapped in a thick blanket, her hands resting on her stomach, feeling the faint movements of her baby as her thoughts drifted back to everything that had happened. Margaret moved around the dining table with purposeful steps. Her phone lay beside a stack of printed emails and documents. At exactly 9 o'clock, Margaret made her first call. Her voice was steady, clear, and sharply professional. This is Chief Justice Hartman, she said, introducing herself to the representative at the State Bar of Vermont. I am opening a formal ethics complaint regarding Attorney Adam Cole. I will submit a complete package of evidence today. Emily listened silently. Hearing her mother speak with that level of authority sent a strange mixture of comfort and fear through her chest. She knew this was necessary, but the idea of exposing her husband to such consequences still made her heart ache. Margaret ended the call and immediately began uploading every email Emily had collected over the past months. There were messages between Adam and Lana that revealed their affair, conversations about Emily, and disturbing hints of unethical behavior at his law firm. Margaret arranged them into a clear chronological file, then forwarded everything to the disciplinary committee. The moment the bar received the complaint, things moved quickly. Adam was called into an emergency meeting at his firm. He entered the conference room expecting a routine discussion, but instead found the managing partners sitting with stiff shoulders and grim expressions. A folder sat in the center of the table. Inside were printed copies of the emails that had been sent to the bar. Adam, one partner said, this is extremely serious. We need to know immediately whether any of this is true. Adam tried to speak, his voice cracked. There are misunderstandings. Someone is exaggerating. I can explain. But his explanations sounded weak even to him. The partners exchanged a silent look, and the senior partner finally said, until this matter is resolved, you are suspended from all active cases. Please turn in your laptop, access card, and any confidential materials before leaving the building. Adam felt the room spin. He tried to protest, but the decision was final. Meanwhile, at the same law firm, Lana was summoned to an internal ethics meeting. She arrived with makeup hastily applied over puffy eyes, but nothing could hide the tension in her posture. The HR representative asked her to sit. 3 partners looked at her coldly. Miss Price, one said, you have been named in an ethics investigation. You will need to present your involvement and provide full cooperation. Lana's hands trembled. Her voice was barely audible. I will cooperate. I did not think things would go this far. But no one responded with sympathy. When she walked out, she felt coworkers watching her from their offices. Some turned away quickly, others whispered. The humiliation tightened around her like a rope. Back at home, Emily signed the temporary separation documents Margaret had prepared. It was the first legal step she had ever taken against her husband. Margaret reviewed every page carefully before signing as a witness. Emily's chest rose and fell in slow breaths as she accepted the reality of her decision. By afternoon, neighbors began dropping by. Vermont communities were small, and news moved fast. People brought warm soup, floral arrangements, and handwritten notes. Many had suspected something was wrong between Emily and Adam, but never imagined the situation was this serious. Their support filled Emily's living room and her heart. Adam, however, was unraveling. After leaving the firm, he drove aimlessly through the snow-covered town before making his way back to the Hartman house. His eyes were red, his hair was disheveled. When Emily opened the door, he stepped forward desperately. "Emily," he said, "you cannot do this to me. Please withdraw the complaint. Do not ruin my career." Emily's voice remained steady. "I am not ruining anything. You did this." He reached out, but she stepped back. "Emily, please," he repeated. "I am begging you." She closed the door gently, leaving him standing alone in the cold. Across town, Lana faced a storm of her own. Reporters caught a glimpse of her leaving the firm in tears. Photos appeared online with captions suggesting she was the mistress at the center of the scandal. Comment sections filled with judgment. People accused her of destroying a family. A story even surfaced about a previous workplace conflict she had been involved in years earlier. Everything she had tried to hide began resurfacing. Margaret arranged for Emily to meet the family's long-trusted attorney. He listened carefully to everything Emily had endured and reviewed the evidence Margaret had collected. When he finished reading, he nodded firmly. "You have a strong case. You will be protected. The law is on your side." Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. At the law firm, Adam received an email demanding a complete written explanation of his professional conduct within 48 hours. The tone was stern and uncompromising. He reread the message again and again, feeling his chest tighten. Across town, Lana opened her mailbox to find a letter from the Department of Justice. When she read the words, "possible involvement in evidence tampering," she dropped the letter on the kitchen floor and sank into a chair with trembling hands. She had not expected this. She had thought she could walk away quietly. Now she felt trapped in a cage of her own making. By evening, Adam realized something he had never admitted to himself before. For the first time in his life, he was not in control. His job, his reputation, his future, and even his freedom were slipping away faster than he could grab them. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The story of Emily Hartman did not stay within Vermont for long. Within 24 hours, her emotional testimony from the community meeting was shared across multiple social media platforms. Women's advocacy groups reposted it. Parenting forums discussed it. Influencers with millions of followers talked about the bravery of a pregnant woman standing up against betrayal and manipulation. What began as a local scandal quickly gained national attention. Emily watched the numbers rise with a mix of disbelief and fear. Her voice, once silenced inside her home, was now echoing across the country. A well-known national television program reached out the next morning. They requested an interview with Emily for their segment titled Brave Voices, a series highlighting survivors who had stepped forward to speak about injustice. Margaret reviewed the request carefully. She read every detail of the format, the crew, the contractual terms, and the proposed questions. She called the producer directly, her tone polite yet commanding. After a brief negotiation, Margaret agreed to the interview, but insisted it be filmed privately at a controlled location to protect Emily's mental and physical health. The producer agreed immediately. While preparations began for the interview, journalists started investigating Adam's career. One newspaper uncovered a disciplinary note from 3 years earlier. It was minor, but it hinted at a pattern of questionable judgment. A former co-worker recognized Adam's name in the headlines and posted anonymously about his past behavior, claiming he had manipulated younger colleagues, especially women, to gain professional advantages. The claims went viral. More discussions erupted online. Adam's reputation, once polished, was now crumbling under the weight of public scrutiny. Meanwhile, investigators began uncovering new information about Lana. People dug through her old photos. One picture in particular showed her at a beach resort with Adam around the same time Emily was in her second trimester. Someone compared dates and posted the timeline publicly. The image spread across the internet with harsh criticism. Lana woke up to hundreds of comments attacking her. She tried to delete some from her social media accounts, but it was impossible to keep up. Desperate, Adam attempted to regain control. He instructed his lawyer to file a defamation complaint against Emily. He claimed Emily's public statements had caused him emotional distress and professional harm. When Emily received the notice, she panicked for a moment, but Margaret stepped in immediately. She prepared a counterclaim that included solid evidence of Adam's affair and manipulative behavior. Her response was immediate and devastating. Adam's complaint lost power the moment it reached the desk of the reviewing attorney. Then another blow landed. Someone uploaded a video clip of Adam screaming in front of Emily's house during the night he came begging for help. The footage showed him shouting angrily while Emily retreated behind the door. The clip spread nationwide. It appeared on late-night talk shows and social media reactions. Commentators labeled his behavior unstable and dangerous. Several neighbors stepped forward after seeing the video. They contacted local police and offered statements describing Adam's previous behavior. They confirmed that he had caused multiple disturbances, especially in recent weeks. With these testimonies, the Vermont Police Department issued Adam an official written warning about his conduct. Lana received a letter of her own that same day. It came from a federal investigative office. The letter informed her that she was required to appear for a formal interview regarding possible participation in evidence manipulation. When she read the words, she felt her chest tighten. She sank onto her couch, holding the paper with trembling hands. She realized her involvement with Adam had spiraled into something she no longer understood. While chaos overtook Adam and Lana, Margaret's private investigative team continued digging into Adam's emails. One investigator discovered several messages between Adam and a co-worker discussing the possibility of altering a document to avoid consequences in a previous legal case. Margaret read the report carefully. She knew the implications immediately. This was no longer just a matter of infidelity or emotional harm. This was potential criminal behavior. Emily received a call later that afternoon from a state official. The caller explained that if the evidence continued to point toward misconduct, her case might qualify for a witness protection program. Emily sat quietly as the caller explained her rights. She felt both frightened and strangely relieved at the idea that people finally understood the seriousness of what she had endured. At the same time, Adam's law firm stopped paying his retainer salary until the investigation concluded. Without that financial support, Adam struggled to pay his bills. His savings began disappearing rapidly. He contacted the firm several times, but they refused to reinstate his access to anything. Lana's situation worsened too. Her contract work with several clients was immediately canceled. The firm she worked for part-time removed her from every internal system, leaving her effectively unemployed. She stared at her inbox, which filled with cancellation notices and formal notifications. She felt as though she had stepped into quicksand, and every attempt to pull herself out only dragged her deeper. Meanwhile, dozens of messages poured into Emily's inbox. Many were from women who had survived similar experiences. Some shared their stories. Others thanked Emily for giving them the courage to speak up. Emily cried, reading them, overwhelmed by the strength and vulnerability of strangers who understood her pain. Across the country, legal organizations began discussing Adam's case. One state bar from a neighboring state suggested launching a multi-state investigation into his recent work history. The idea that Adam's misconduct might extend beyond Vermont sent shockwaves through legal circles. Margaret received a mysterious envelope delivered to her office. Inside was a USB drive with no name or sender. Her security team scanned it carefully. After confirming it was safe, they opened the files. What appeared on the screen made Margaret's eyes narrow with focus. The evidence inside was powerful. It was the missing piece she had been waiting for. It was enough to change everything. The mysterious envelope arrived on a cold Vermont morning, delivered quietly to Margaret Hartman's private home office. There was no sender listed, and no identifying marks on the surface. Only a small USB drive lay inside. Margaret did not open anything without security checks, so she handed the drive to her digital forensics assistant, who scanned it thoroughly. When he confirmed the files were clean, Margaret inserted the USB into her laptop. As soon as the first audio file started playing, her eyes sharpened with focus. The voice on the recording was unmistakable. It was Adam Cole, and he was instructing Lana Price to alter a legal document for one of his cases. Margaret leaned back slowly in her chair and replayed the recording from the beginning. Adam's voice sounded confident, even demanding, as he explained exactly what he wanted changed. Lana responded nervously, asking whether the alteration could put them at risk. Adam dismissed her concerns. He told her to stop overthinking and simply follow his instructions. Margaret listened several times, ensuring every word was authentic. The clarity of the recording left no room for denial. She exhaled deeply, knowing this single piece of evidence had the power to change everything. She closed her laptop and prepared the file for transfer. Within 1 hour, the audio recording reached the United States Department of Justice. A federal contact she trusted confirmed receipt and informed her that the document manipulation described in the recording could qualify as a serious violation of federal law. Margaret did not celebrate the news. She only nodded, understanding the gravity of what was unfolding. She then walked to the living room where Emily sat on the couch holding a warm cup of tea. Emily saw her mother's expression and knew something significant had happened. "There is a recording," Margaret said gently, "and it is his voice, clear as day." Emily's eyes widened. Shock mixed with a sense of relief washed over her. For so long she had felt invisible and doubted. Now the evidence spoke louder than any argument. It proved Adam was not only unfaithful, but actively unethical. Emily inhaled shakily. For the first time in months, she felt the weight on her chest begin to lighten. The next morning, Adam received an urgent notice from the state bar. He was ordered to appear at an emergency disciplinary hearing. The message arrived before he could finish his first cup of coffee. His hands trembled as he read it. Panic spread through him as he imagined what evidence they must have collected. When he arrived at the state bar office, he attempted to remain composed, but sweat gathered on the back of his neck. He entered a formal conference room where a panel of investigators waited behind a long wooden table. After he sat down, they played the recording. Adam's face drained of color. He blinked rapidly, searching for words, but everything he said sounded like panic. "This is out of context," he insisted. "Someone edited my voice. I would never instruct anyone to alter a legal document." But his attempt at denial fell apart immediately. One investigator paused the recording and asked directly, "Is this or is this not your voice?" Adam hesitated. That hesitation answered the question more clearly than any confession could. After Adam's statement, the panel requested Lana to enter. She stepped inside the room pale and fragile. Her hands shook as she held a small folder containing personal notes. When asked about the recording, Lana broke down. Tears streamed down her face before she spoke. "He told me to do everything," she said. "I never wanted to alter anything. He pressured me. He made me feel like I would lose my job if I refused." Her voice cracked as she continued, "I thought he knew what he was doing. I was scared to say no." The panel took careful notes. They did not allow Adam to interrupt. They informed him that all his professional accounts and work systems would be frozen immediately. Adam tried to argue, but the decision had already been finalized. He felt as though the ground beneath him had vanished. Outside the building, a swarm of reporters waited near the entrance. Word had leaked that Adam had been summoned to the bar. Microphones and cameras pointed toward the doors. When Adam stepped out, several journalists rushed forward and began shouting questions. "Did you falsify legal documents? Is the misconduct true? Is the mistress cooperating against you?" The pressure overwhelmed him. In a moment of frustration, he tried to snatch a microphone from a reporter. The brief struggle was caught on several cameras. Within hours, the video appeared online and quickly became a viral meme. Large news networks released headlines calling Adam the falling lawyer of Vermont. Comment sections filled with ridicule. No apology Adam offered could save his reputation. When he posted a video expressing regret, the internet mocked him, comparing his apology to a failed performance. Emily read some of the comments but stopped quickly. She placed her phone aside and held her belly gently. Margaret encouraged her to rest and not expose herself to unnecessary stress. Meanwhile, Lana received her own devastating blow. She opened a letter from federal authorities, informing her she would be interviewed regarding possible involvement in evidence tampering. She sank onto the floor, shaking uncontrollably. Tears dripped onto the envelope. She had never imagined her connection to Adam would lead her into federal trouble. She tried messaging Adam, but he did not respond. She then tried calling him, but he ignored every attempt. Adam received a final notice later that evening. He was ordered to appear for a federal investigative interview within 72 hours. The letter made his chest tighten. He knew federal investigations were serious, thorough, and unforgiving. Everything he had tried to hide would soon be exposed under a national spotlight. That night, Emily sat quietly in the living room with Margaret beside her. She placed a hand on her stomach and whispered, "It is almost over." Margaret nodded. This is only the beginning of the courtroom process, but the truth is finally speaking for itself. Emily realized then that she was no longer walking through fear. She was standing at the doorway of justice. Her voice, her pain, her truth were finally being acknowledged, and the real trial was now waiting just ahead. The day Adam Cole officially faced federal charges arrived with a cold wind sweeping across Vermont. The courthouse stood tall and imposing against the gray sky. Federal officers escorted Adam inside through a side entrance to avoid the growing crowd gathered out front. Reporters lined the sidewalks, raising cameras, shouting questions, and pushing against barricades. Every headline in the region focused on the same story. The disgraced attorney, accused of manipulating legal documents and emotionally abusing his pregnant wife, was finally stepping into the courtroom where justice waited. Inside the Vermont District Court building, tension filled the hallways. Federal agents moved with stern expressions, while clerks hurried between offices carrying files. Adam walked with shaking hands, his wrists cold with sweat. His suit, once meticulously pressed, looked wrinkled and unsteady. He tried to keep his head up, but embarrassment weighed heavily on him. He knew the charges against him were severe. He knew the evidence was overwhelming. The courtroom itself was packed. Every seat was filled with journalists, law students, victims' advocates, and curious members of the public. The air felt thick with anticipation. When the judge entered, the room stood. Adam avoided eye contact with the crowd and sat quickly when instructed. His breathing sped up the moment the first federal prosecutor rose to speak. Emily arrived through a private entrance, accompanied by Margaret. Emily's hands trembled slightly, but she stood straighter when she felt her mother's reassuring grip on her arm. Margaret guided her gently toward the designated witness waiting area. The sound of cameras clicking echoed faintly from outside the courtroom, reminding Emily that the entire state and much of the nation was paying attention to this moment. The prosecutor began presenting evidence. His voice was firm and steady. He laid out a timeline of Adam's misconduct, starting with the affair, then moving into the unethical decisions made inside the law firm. When he introduced the anonymous audio recording, the courtroom became silent. The speakers played Adam's voice, instructing Lana to alter a legal document. His tone in the recording was confident and commanding, leaving no doubt about his intentions. Gasps rippled through the room. Some of the jurors exchanged glances. The judge remained expressionless, but Emily could see his jaw tighten ever so slightly. Adam felt exposed. He tried to interrupt, insisting the recording was manipulated, but the judge ordered him to remain silent. His attorney whispered frantically for him to stay calm. Adam's shoulders slumped, and he stared at the floor, realizing every denial only made him look more guilty. Lana was then escorted into the courtroom. Her appearance drew another wave of murmurs. She looked as if she had aged overnight. Her hair was tied back tightly, and her eyes were swollen from crying. She took her seat at the witness stand with trembling hands. When the prosecutor asked whether the recording was authentic, she nodded slowly and wiped her eyes. She admitted she had followed Adam's directions and that she had been afraid to refuse him. Her confession carried through the courtroom like a final blow. The defense attempted to paint Lana as unstable, but the strategy failed when the prosecutor displayed her written confession, signed voluntarily the night before. Lana kept her eyes lowered, avoiding Adam's gaze. Several jurors watched her with a mix of disappointment and pity. The truth had finally reached the light. When it was Emily's turn to testify, she felt her knees weaken. But Margaret squeezed her hand and whispered, "You are not alone." Emily inhaled deeply and stepped into the courtroom. Every eye turned toward her. She felt the weight of the moment but found courage inside herself. She walked slowly to the witness stand. Her voice shook at first, but she grew steadier as she told her story. She described the baby shower, the shock from the text message, and the moment Lana confronted her in her own home. She explained how Adam belittled her, dismissed her pain, and manipulated her into believing she was overreacting. She recounted the night he screamed outside her house and the fear she felt when he refused to help her during emotional distress. As she spoke, the courtroom grew completely silent. Even the reporters stopped typing. When she finished, the judge allowed her a moment to compose herself. Margaret stood in the front row, her expression proud and unwavering. Emily stepped down from the stand and returned to her seat beside her mother. Adam finally broke down. His chest heaved as he cried openly in front of the courtroom. He apologized repeatedly, his words barely understandable through his sobs. His attorney placed a hand on his back, trying to calm him, but Adam appeared completely lost. The man who once believed he controlled everything now seemed like a frightened shadow of himself. Outside the courthouse, major news networks pushed updates every few minutes. They titled the proceedings the Vermont Justice Case. Legal analysts across the country discussed the implications for ethical standards in the profession. Hashtags about Emily's courage trended nationwide. Back inside, the prosecutor concluded his argument by recommending a strict sentence. He emphasized the need to protect vulnerable individuals from emotional and professional manipulation. He cited the importance of upholding the integrity of the legal system. His final words echoed across the courtroom with strength. After him, Lana was called once more. This time, she approached Adam from the witness stand. Her voice cracked as she said she regretted everything she had done. She admitted she should have stopped him, but she had been afraid. She stared into the distance as she stepped down, unable to face the consequences of her choices. The judge announced that the court would soon prepare to read the verdict. Emily felt Margaret squeeze her hand again. She took a deep breath, sensing the end was near. The storm had roared through every corner of her life, but she had survived long enough to see justice rise. And now, with the courtroom silent and the air heavy with expectation, she knew the next words she would hear could change everything. The 9th day of the trial began with a heavy stillness in the Vermont District Court. Snow clouds hung low outside the tall windows, muting the daylight that filtered into the hallway. Emily stood quietly beside Margaret, her hands gently resting on her stomach. Her nerves trembled beneath her skin. After everything, after months of fear, humiliation, and battles in the spotlight, this was the day she would hear the judgment that would close the darkest chapter of her life. Margaret placed a steady hand on her daughter's back as they approached the courtroom doors. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "you are safe now." Emily nodded, breathing slowly to keep herself calm. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere buzzed with tension. Reporters filled the back rows. Cameras were not allowed inside, but every journalist had their notebook ready. Advocates for women's rights occupied one section. Law students filled another. The public benches were full. Everyone had come to witness what many in the media were calling the defining legal moment of the Vermont justice case. When the bailiff announced the judge's entrance, the entire room rose to its feet. The rustling of clothes and the scraping of benches echoed through the chamber. Adam stood too, though unsteadily. His hands shook so noticeably that even the jurors exchanged glances. He tried to steady his breathing, but panic clung to him like a second skin. The judge settled into his seat, adjusted his glasses, and gave a slow nod to the clerk. The room fell silent. No one dared whisper. Adam's attorney leaned toward him, urging him under his breath to stay composed. But Adam's eyes remained wide, fixed on the polished floor, as though searching for a way out. The judge began reading the charges, his voice deep and deliberate. Each count struck the room like a heavy blow. The silence sharpened as the judge's words floated through the air. Manipulation of legal documents, ethical misconduct, coercive behavior toward a subordinate, emotional endangerment of a pregnant spouse. Every accusation reminded Adam of the decisions that had led him here. Then came the moment the room had been waiting for. Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict? the judge asked. The foreperson stood. "We have, Your Honor." The courtroom held its breath. "On the charge of federal document manipulation, we find the defendant guilty, O10. On the charge of ethical misconduct and breach of professional duty, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of coercive behavior resulting in harm to a vulnerable spouse, we find the defendant guilty." A wave of whispers burst through the room like a sudden gust of wind. Some gasped, others covered their mouths. A few let out quiet cheers before being silenced by the bailiff. Emily clasped her hands over her stomach and closed her eyes briefly, overwhelmed by emotion. Margaret glanced at her, giving her a small nod of pride and reassurance. Next came Lana. When the judge addressed her charges, she broke into tears. Her shoulders shook with each sob. She had cooperated with the investigation and provided testimony against Adam, but hearing the official charges and knowing she would also face consequences struck her deeply. She looked down, avoiding every gaze that tried to meet hers. Adam, however, looked frozen. His expression seemed hollow, as though he could not fully comprehend the verdict. His pupils trembled, his jaw slackened. For a moment it appeared he might faint. His lawyer whispered urgently, but Adam did not respond. The prosecutor stood and addressed the court. He recommended a sentence of 6 to 10 years in federal custody. He emphasized the seriousness of Adam's crimes and the need for accountability to protect the integrity of the legal system. He also addressed the emotional devastation inflicted on Emily, describing her as a victim of severe psychological manipulation during pregnancy. Adam's attorney attempted a counter-argument. He insisted that Adam had been under severe emotional strain. He claimed Adam's mental health had deteriorated and begged the court to consider leniency, but the judge's face remained stern. When the defense finished, the judge spoke firmly. "The defendant's actions demonstrated intentional misconduct," he said. "Emotional instability cannot excuse a pattern of calculated decisions." The sentencing came swiftly. "Adam Cole," the judge announced, "you are hereby sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. You will not be eligible for parole for a minimum of 5 years." Gasps filled the courtroom again, louder than before. Adam's eyes widened, his mouth opening slightly without forming words. He swayed in place. 2 deputies moved closer, anticipating instability. The judge then turned to Lana. "Given your cooperation," he said, "this court sentences you to 3 years of supervised probation and 300 hours of community service." Lana cried harder, but nodded repeatedly. She understood she had been spared the harsher outcome. The moment Adam was handcuffed, the courtroom erupted again. Reporters scribbled furiously. Several attendees whispered prayers of gratitude or murmured relief. Flashbulbs flickered through the glass windows as photographers captured the exact moment deputies clasped the cuffs around Adam's wrists. Emily lowered her head and cried softly. It was not a cry of triumph. It was a cry of release. Release from fear. Release from years of emotional weight. Margaret wrapped her arms around her daughter. "Justice has done its work," she whispered gently. "You are free." As Adam was led away, he turned to look at Emily one last time. His expression was full of despair, regret, and disbelief. But Emily did not return the look. She no longer carried the pain he once had the power to inflict. Her heart no longer responded to him. Lana avoided every eye in the courtroom as she quietly signed the paperwork, confirming her cooperation agreement. She kept her head bowed, hoping no reporter would recognize her long enough to snap another photo. Meanwhile, deputies escorted Adam through the side doors of the courthouse. Flashlights went off like a storm of white sparks outside the glass foyer. He kept his head down, unable to face the cameras capturing his downfall. Emily and Margaret rose from their seats and walked toward the exit. As they stepped outside, a soft beam of sunlight broke through the clouds and illuminated Emily's face. It felt like the first warm light she had felt in months. She placed a hand on her stomach and breathed deeply. She was not just free, she was reborn. The Vermont air felt different when Emily stepped out of the car and onto the familiar gravel driveway of her childhood home. The snow had begun to melt, leaving behind patches of soft grass and puddles that reflected the pale sunlight of early spring. She held her mother's arm for support as she walked toward the front porch. Her belly was rounder now, her steps slower, but her spirit felt lighter than it had in many months. As she reached the door, several neighbors appeared along the walkway, carrying flowers, warm food, and small gifts. "Welcome home, Emily," Mrs. Thompson said, placing a hand over her heart. She was the elderly neighbor who often baked pies in the summer. "We are so proud of you." Others echoed similar sentiments. Some hugged her gently, some simply smiled. It was the first time Emily felt surrounded by pure kindness instead of fear or judgment. She thanked each person softly before finally stepping inside the warm, familiar house. The next morning, the pastor of the local church visited. He brought a bouquet of white lilies and a handmade card signed by members of the congregation. "These are for you," he said warmly. "You have endured more than most people ever should. We wanted you to know we have prayed for you every day." Emily held the flowers close, touched by the thoughtfulness. It felt overwhelming to receive such genuine care after months of turmoil. Margaret spent the following week helping Emily regain a sense of stability. She met with financial advisors, organized Emily's legal documents, and created a long-term plan to ensure both Emily and the baby would never face insecurity again. Emily watched her mother work tirelessly and felt grateful for her unwavering strength. It reminded her that family, when rooted in love, could rebuild anything. Soon after, Emily received an invitation to speak at a women's protection conference. The event focused on emotional abuse, psychological manipulation, and legal rights for women going through crises. Emily hesitated at first. The thought of speaking in front of hundreds of people made her nervous. But Margaret encouraged her. "Your story will help others," she said gently, "and sharing it might heal you too." Emily agreed. On the day of the conference, she stood backstage, listening to the quiet hum of the audience. When her name was announced, she stepped onto the stage. The room was filled with women of all ages. Some wiped tears. Some leaned forward attentively. Emily told them about the fear she once lived with, the confusion she felt, and the strength she discovered when she finally stood up for herself. When she finished, the audience rose to their feet. The applause washed over her like warm sunlight. It was one of the most powerful moments of her life. After the event, she received dozens of letters from women who said her courage inspired them. Some shared their own experiences with abusive partners. Others simply thanked her for speaking when they could not. Emily kept every letter in a box beneath her bed. She read a few every night and reminded herself that healing did not happen alone. It happened through connection. A week later, she was approached by a non-profit organization focused on supporting women affected by psychological manipulation. They asked her to be an ambassador for their upcoming national campaign. Emily accepted the offer with gratitude. She wanted her voice to help others find theirs. As media requests continued to arrive, Emily made a conscious choice about the tone of every interview. She refused to speak with anger. Instead, she spoke softly, focusing on growth, healing, and forgiveness. She told interviewers that holding on to hatred only prolonged pain. Many viewers admired her maturity and strength. She became a symbol of grace in the face of injustice. Months passed, and then the moment Emily had been preparing for finally came. She went into labor on a calm afternoon and was taken to the Vermont hospital where she had been receiving her prenatal care. The delivery room was filled with gentle voices and supportive nurses. After several intense hours, her baby entered the world with a strong cry that echoed against the walls. The doctor smiled. "You have a healthy baby," she said warmly. Emily held her child for the first time and felt tears stream down her cheeks. She named him after her grandfather, a man who had been a pillar of strength in her family. Margaret wept when she held her grandchild. Her hands trembled slightly as she whispered, "Welcome to the world, little one." It was the first time Emily had seen her mother cry from pure joy in a long time. A few days later, Emily wrote a heartfelt letter to the federal prosecutor who had taken her case seriously from the beginning. She thanked him for protecting her and ensuring justice was done. She sealed the envelope with a steady hand, grateful that honesty and integrity still existed in the world. Her story continued to spread. One national television network reached out with a proposal to produce a documentary about the case. Emily agreed, under one condition. All proceeds had to go to a foundation supporting women escaping abusive relationships. The studio accepted immediately. Filming began discreetly, capturing Emily's journey of healing rather than focusing solely on the trial. One morning, Emily opened her mailbox and discovered an envelope from Lana. Inside was a handwritten letter full of remorse. Lana apologized for every role she had played in the suffering Emily endured. She explained that she had been manipulated, afraid, and deeply ashamed. Emily read the letter slowly. She felt no anger, only a quiet sadness. She chose not to write back, but she wished Lana healing in her heart. Another letter arrived from the federal prison months later. It was from Adam. Emily recognized the handwriting but did not open it. She placed it in a drawer and left it unopened. She had moved beyond that chapter. The words inside held no power over her anymore. As spring turned to summer, Emily often stood on the front porch with her baby in her arms. Birds chirped in the nearby trees. Sunlight filtered through the leaves overhead. She inhaled deeply and felt a peace she had not known in years. Her child slept soundly, unaware of the battles his mother had fought for his future. Emily smiled softly. She had survived. She had grown. She had risen. And in the warm Vermont air, she finally understood who she had become. A woman stronger than her past. A mother guided by hope. A survivor reborn.